About a month ago, the NBA's trade deadline came and went, and while that period of the season always brings about a good amount of change, this year's trade deadline literally shocked the entire sporting world. There were so many blockbuster deals that went down in that short span, seeing some of the biggest names in the sport change teams, and things like that typically generate huge overreactions stemming from emotions running high in the moment. Now that the dust has settled, and we've actually seen what the product looks like on the court with these no-look squads, it's time to revisit these deals and give them new grades based on how things are working out for each team and what their future looks like moving forward after this. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first trade we'll be revisiting is the biggest deal of all that sent shockwaves through the basketball world, being the three-team deal between the Mavericks, Lakers, and Jazz, where Luka Doncic was sent to the Lakers, with the full details of the trade being on your screen. But grade-wise, we'll be focusing on the Mavericks and Lakers side of things, so for the Lakers, this deal gets an A+, and the grade for the Mavericks is an F-. I'm sorry, an F 1 month later still just doesn't seem low enough for how catastrophic this move was for the Mavericks, so an F- is being broken out. Luka Doncic is just not the kind of talent that you trade ever. It doesn't matter what kind of issues he has on or off the court, it doesn't matter if he goes through a brief slump, and it doesn't matter if you as a general manager have a personal vendetta against him. Unless he asks out and requests a trade, a player like that should be at the front and center of your franchise for at least the next decade. So to not only trade him, but to do so completely out of the blue, to the point where it blindsides him, and to trade him away at such a discount is genuine malpractice. Anthony Davis is a great player, there's no denying it, but he is 32 years old and very injury prone. When you make a trade like this for someone in Davis's position, it puts your team in championship or bust mode, and the fact of the matter is that busting is way more likely than winning a championship, and unfortunately that gamble predictably did not pay off, with Davis straining his adductor, missing over a week of play already, and is expected to be out for a while longer. The lack of help around Kyrie Irving then as a result of this had him playing the most minutes in the NBA since the trade, and Kyrie unfortunately suffered a torn ACL, so things have gone from bad to worse for the Mavericks, and everything is crumbling before their eyes. This is a group that was literally in the NBA Finals last season, and their general manager decided to do the unthinkable and ruin everything for them, and now they have an old veteran core plagued by injuries and a bleak future. The Lakers, however, have been enjoying every second of having Luka in town. For starters, he serves as the foundation of the team's future when the post-LeBron era eventually comes about, with his retirement looming. They didn't really have an answer for what would come next, but now they have arguably the best solution in the NBA for that problem. Just build around Luka. They've also been red hot ever since making the trade, with Luka coming in and taking the team's offense to new heights, and they've also won 12 out of 15 games since the trade and shot all the way up to the 2 seed in the Western Conference. The craziest part of it all is that since the trade, the Lakers have also had the NBA's #1 ranked defense, so all of the narratives running rampant and the smear campaigns the Mavericks front office have tried to run about Luka being out of weight or out of shape and a complete liability on defense isn't even the case in LA, because if anything, the team's defense has improved tenfold since his arrival. Of course, there are other factors contributing, such as the emergence of Jackson Hayes, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a finally healthy Jared Vanderbilt, but they're a tough group with a scary balance of lockdown defenders and elite playmakers now. I can't say I was expecting them to be contenders immediately after the trade, but after seeing them in action over the last month, they have as good of a chance as anyone to give the Oklahoma City Thunder a run for their money in that conference. The next trade we'll be revisiting is the 5-team trade that featured Jimmy Butler going to the Golden State Warriors, with the full details of that trade being on your screen now, but we'll be focusing on the Warriors and Heat, so the grades for the Warriors is an A, and the grade for the Heat is a C+. The Warriors were sinking down the standings fast and needed to take drastic measures to get themselves back on track, so they dove headfirst into the Jimmy Butler experience, knowing it's a wild ride, but at its best can bear some very fruitful results. Butler was, in many measures, having his worst season in a decade, but it's also fair to point out that his motivation to perform well was also at an all-time low ever since his beef with Heat president Pat Riley began over the summer. The standoff between the two started after their elimination from the playoffs last year when Riley took a shot at Jimmy over his trash talking. It continued when the Heat front office made it clear that they did not want to offer him a max contract extension, and with the Heat looking headed for the play-in tournament yet again, he made his intentions to leave very clear and got his wish now playing next to Steph Curry. The Warriors desperately needed another shot creator in their lineup because Steph's ability to separate had been waning, Jonathan Kuminga hadn't quite taken the leap they were hoping he would make, and Andrew Wiggins has only ever been good as a third option, and then the rest of the rotation is filled with specialists that can't necessarily be relied upon to generate their own offense on a consistent basis. Butler may not be dominating since his arrival in Golden State, putting up similar production to what he was putting up in Miami this year, but his presence alone makes life so much easier for the rest of the team, drawing attention from defenses, and the Warriors are red hot since the deal, winning 9 of their last 10 games. The Heat, however, are now stuck in no man's land without a true number one option on their roster, and moving forward, they may find themselves stuck in mediocrity. Andrew Wiggins is fine as a replacement, but he's a clear step down. A first-round pick is nice, but it has a protection on it, and a core of Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Terry Rozier, and Andrew Wiggins is just not built to win anything meaningful, and the return that they got for Jimmy feels like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. The next trade we'll be revisiting is the 3-team deal between the Bulls, Kings, and Spurs, sending De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio and Zach LaVine to Sacramento, and the grades here are an A- for the Spurs, a B+ for the Kings, and a D for the Bulls. This season is unfortunately a wash for the Spurs because when they made this trade, they were in 12th place in the Western Conference standings, hoping it could boost them at least into the play-in tournament. But shortly after this went down, Victor Wembanyama suffered an injury that now has him shut down for the rest of the year. The remainder of this season is now being spent on continuing to bring up the young guys, giving them more reps, while also integrating De'Aaron Fox into their schemes and getting him settled in, while accepting that their playoff hopes are dead. Even with that being the case though, this trade was never meant to be about the short term. It's all about getting Victor Wembanyama, an all-star caliber point guard, to build with for the foreseeable future, and now heading into next season, they will have real aspirations to make a playoff run. Chris Paul was only ever a placeholder at the point guard position, with retirement looming for him, so finding Fox to be that permanent solution is a home run. For the Kings side of things, having your franchise point guard ask out is never ideal, and they were stuck in the realm of mediocrity already as it is, but taking everything into consideration, it's hard to envision a scenario where they come away much better than what they got in return for Fox. 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks is already a solid starting point in any star player trade, but then when you factor in them getting Zach LaVine as well, and it's enough to hold things over in the short term at least while they figure out where exactly they want to go from here. Zach LaVine is bouncing back extraordinarily this season as one of the most efficient volume scorers in the whole league, and with the Kings, he's helped them stay afloat in the playoff mix, despite everyone writing them off after their trade went down, with them currently in 9th place, comfortably in the play-in range. Lastly, it needs to be said that the Bulls' involvement was questionable at the time the deal went down, and a month later, I'm still scratching my head at why this was what they ultimately pulled the trigger on for a Zach LaVine trade. LaVine's stock was definitely low last year when he was underperforming and injured, so if this trade went down last season, I would understand, but LaVine has been sensational this year, and they moved him for pennies on the dollar. Kevin Huerter is a shooter that can't actually shoot above league average as a rate, Trey Jones is barely a backup point guard at the NBA level, and Zach Collins is a steady, yet overpaid backup level center, so it just felt like they rushed this process in the end. And finally, the last trade we'll be revisiting today is the deal between the Pelicans and the Raptors that sent Brandon Ingram to Toronto, and the grades here are a C- for the Pelicans and a B for the Raptors. This one's tougher to judge at the moment because Brandon Ingram has been injured for the last few months and still has not been able to suit up for the Raptors yet, but with the Raptors seeming to embrace the tank to end the season, they're also probably not rushing him back anytime soon either. What the Raptors are planning is building an entire lineup filled with size, length, and versatility on both ends of the floor, and Ingram fits right into that mold. Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Brandon Ingram are all very skilled and versatile wing players with the size and length to pester opponents on defense, and even the team's guards, Emmanuel Quickley and Ochai Agbaji, both have 6' 10" wingspans, so despite being smaller in terms of height, they also have the ideal length of a solid NBA defender. The only potential downfall with this core is that there isn't enough consistent shooting in the lineup, so spacing could prove to be a problem, but I see the vision and think their situation is one of the more intriguing ones to see play out moving forward. Ingram is hitting free agency this summer though, so all of this is contingent on the Raptors being able to successfully re-sign him, but you get the feeling that they wouldn't have made this trade without the confidence that they would be able to bring him back. As for the Pelicans, this is another example of the team waiting too long to decide what they wanted to do with a player, which forced them to sell low. With Ingram's contract expiring, they lost a lot of leverage in trade talks, and while getting a first-round pick in return is alright, it's not great. Bruce Brown is also another expiring contract that they likely won't be able to re-sign, so his inclusion in the trade is irrelevant. Kelly Olynyk is not moving any needles, and all in all, they ended up holding the bag because of their indecisiveness. When it became clear over a year ago that Brandon Ingram was not going to be a part of their long-term plans, they should have acted then to get as much of a return as possible. But now, instead, they're going down as another lesson of what not to do. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these trades 1 month later. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.